Hi, welcome to Photo Focus. My name is Tom Shue, and today we're going to do another Lightroom tutorial. And in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you exactly what's going on inside the Develop module of Lightroom 4. What I've done is I created a graphic, and in this graphic it's a gradient. Over here, from here to here is solid black, and from here to here is solid white. I'm going to just use this image as a tool, or this graphic as a tool to show you what these sliders are doing. In Lightroom 4, they've changed the sliders a little bit. We now have highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, where before we had fill, light, and recovery and things like this. Exposure and contrast hasn't changed. However, these new sliders, they give you a lot more flexibility and control of exact adjustments, and I'll show you what I mean. If we hold down the Alt key, it will give us an overlay or a mask to show you where a white point is, for example, in exposure. And you can see that I have pretty vast control over where my white point will be if I use that exposure slider. I'll double click exposure to reset it to its default. Now if I come down here to the whites, I can also get a control over my white point, but note that it's not as wide a range of control. Now my black point, if I hold down the Alt key, I can set a black point. And if I hold down the Alt key and select highlights, you can see again there's an overlay and the shadows as well. Okay. But to get a real good idea of what's happening inside these sliders and how they differ, I'm going to show you a different way to look at it. If we look at this highlights and we slide it to the right and we double click, we can see that it does increase the white area of the image. If we grab the whites and we slide it over, again, it does increase the whites of the image, but it looks like it's doing the same thing. So let's go over here and look in the history, and we'll see when we go to the white clip at 100%, you can see that the white comes all the way over here past the mid-range of the image. So we'll go back to 0, and now look what happens when we do the highlights. Highlights at 100%. Here's the white clipping at 100%, and here is the highlights at 100%. See, that's pretty critical. What's happening here is the highlights slider controls the detail that lives in the highlights section of the image. That's really, really important, because the highlights doesn't affect what's happening in the black area, and neither does the white. Only the shadows and the blacks affects what's in the black area, and I'll show you those. So we'll double click on the highlights to reset it, and we'll bring our black slider all the way over to the black, and we'll double click and bring it back, and we'll bring our shadows over and we'll double click it, and again it looks like they're doing the same thing. So here's the black clip at -100. Notice the point at which it's saturated completely to black, or the black point starts to get really dense, and we'll go to the shadows at 100%. Do you notice that these mid-range shadows, they're protected? The highlight slider and the shadow slider are your detail sliders inside your develop module. Okay, this is really important, and I'll show you how that applies to an image. So let's open up an image real quick and let's look at how this may work. Let's look at this guy here for a second. It's not really that great of an image. However, I'll show you how I would quickly develop this to get a full range of contrast and proper exposure. So what I'll do is I'll hold down my Alt key and I will go to the exposure slider, and I'll slide it to the right until I see it start to clip. Okay? If I pull it to the right, you see the information is clipping, and there it's all clipped. I did that exaggerated just to show you. So I'll bring it all the way back so I don't have any clipping going on. Now the image has a proper exposure, and it's almost has a white point. If I wanted, there's nothing really white in the image, so I don't need to define a white point. However, if I wanted to, I would just push the slider over a little bit more and I would get my white point. But I'll hold the Alt key down and make sure there's no clipping in the image. And now, to bring some information back in the highlight area, I'm going to use my highlight slider to bring it back down. Do you see all that detail that I brought back? But I didn't affect any of the shadow areas. The darker areas of the image, it only affects the highlight region detail information. So I'll reset those highlights. Here we go. I'm going to bring in back my detail. So these are the detail control sliders. So we'll do the same thing with our black. We'll set a black point, and we'll kind of see if there's any areas that might be black, like down in this area there'll be some, and maybe inside the hand area. So we'll watch to see when that starts to clip, because that should be our black. So we'll hold down the Alt key and we'll slide the slider over, and we can start to see that it's clipping in the legs and it's clipping in the hands, and we'll set our black point. I'll bring it down a little bit more because I like a more rich image. So there's our black point in our image, and if I go to the shadow slider, this is going to be the detail in the shadow area. Okay, if I want to open up the shadow detail, I can move it to the right. If I want to decrease the shadow detail, I can move it to the left. Okay, so this is, again, protects all of the highlight information. Watch what happens to this highlight information. It's not going to be affected at all when I move the shadow slider. Do you see this? It doesn't get affected at all. And if I move the highlights, none of the shadow information gets affected. Okay, so it gives us pinpoint control on detail inside of these two sliders. That's pretty neat stuff that you didn't have in previous versions of Lightroom. Well, thanks for watching today. Until next time, we'll see you later.